to the Evolving Media podcast, where we talk about the changing world of media. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, share, or recommend this podcast. It'll help us do more of these so everyone wins. Thank you. Today we'll talk about a field of the media industry most of us come in some sort of contact with on a daily basis: journalism. There are a lot of challenges facing journalists today. Financial challenges, challenges from new and unexpected competitors, the challenge of an ever more elusive audience, and the challenge to disprove the fake news checkmark over and over again. Joining me to talk about these challenges, the possibilities, and a lot more is Gerald Holubowicz. He's the digital product manager at the French Libération newspaper. He keeps tabs on all things journalism and digital over at the journalism.design site, and is doing in-depth research into the world of deep fakes. Join us for a look at where journalism is today and where it might be heading. Welcome. Gerald, thank you very much for joining me for this podcast. So glad to have you here to talk about journalism.
Thanks for inviting me.
So journalism in 2019, there's a lot of things that have changed and rapidly as well. I mean, I started out my career in journalism, but this was back in the 1990s. But looking at journalism today, while a lot of things have changed, some things remain steadfastly the same. For instance, the audience's apparent appetite for scandalous news, etc. So where do you think we should start? What's your view? Where is journalism today, from your point of view?
Well, I would say that actually we didn't move a lot. Of course, you have always a passion for innovation in that field where, the last shiny thing is the thing that will save journalism or the media industry from dying. But actually, I think in terms of practice, we are going back to the basics in some way. When you consider, first thing, when you look at the journalism environment in the US or in Europe, you have more and more people talking about fact checking, that kind of stuff. That involves some kind of deep investigations where you try to actually dig very deep into the different affairs or different kind of events that happens. So basically, it's going back to an investigative process. So that's probably the first move that are actually the newsroom are making. It's that, they are reinvesting that field of investigation. And the second thing is that actually we still try to harness the power of data. And I think that there is a couple of newspapers that are successfully using data for their own good, but not everyone. And it's really hard to actually understand how to master this enormous flow of information coming from users, readers, that kind of stuff. You can use it for investigative journalism. You can use it for the commercial part of journalism, where you try to actually reach new subscribers, new potential markets. So that's two ways to use data, and I think it's still pretty hard to actually, successfully use that. And I would say the third thing would be to the economic independence of the newspapers and the journalists. Yeah. You have one part where you have big media outlets who are independent but are struggling to generate revenues from advertising. It's becoming even harder and harder to get some good revenue since Facebook and Google entered the dance like a few years ago. So everyone is shifting from an ad model to a subscription/membership model. You just have to watch, for example, what is doing The Guardian in that matter.
Yeah, true.
Very interesting. very inspiring. But not everyone is capable to do that kind of stuff. And then you also have some kind of, all the freelancers that are working for less and less money every year, which make them struggle with their own life and question actually their independence if they want to have if they want to make a living from journalism. It's becoming harder and harder. So you have this kind of struggle everywhere about money, independence that are intertwined together, and it's complicated.
It is, and I'm seeing more and more where the borders between being a journalist or a influencer or a social media personality, they're becoming less and less clear. If you look at the citizen journalists that are quite active today, basically regular people with an interest in journalism who start to put out their own stuff and publish their own stuff. The first one I think that really stood out for me was Tim Pool at the Occupy Wall Street. There's been numerous others, of course, but that's one thing also where when you're a journalist today, one of the things that is important for you is to get your articles and your stories out there through social media. Building a brand for yourself suddenly becomes an important and an integral part of your everyday work as a journalist.
Yeah, that's important. But the thing is, I'm not so sure about that citizen journalism thing. I mean, like 10 years ago or something like that, everyone was talking about citizen journalism. In France, we had the Post. We had in the US, I don't remember exactly the name, but I mean, everyone was talking about that, and everyone was betting on that, saying, okay, you know what? In 5 years from now, everyone will send us pictures and songs and contributions and everything. And
user-generated content. User-generated content. Yes.
Yeah, and we are still waiting for that. I mean, I don't see that anywhere. I mean, we have some stuff, and the thing is, I think we didn't understand at the time yet that actually it was not a matter of citizen journalism. The tool that we use as journalists, investigation, asking 2, 3, 4 different sources to, cross the references and our sources and everything and check what we are doing. The tools that we use, record sound recorder, video camera, that kind of stuff, all that is popularized among everyone. You just have to take your iPhone to just, record a great movie or a great documentary or, record perfect songs. And so if you're a bit clever, it's not that hard to produce content that has a journalistic value or an informational value. The thing is, so everyone just took that chance and, everyone is producing in a way that kind of content. The problem is that we didn't recognize that at some point we have to be, as journalists, some kind of beacon in the dark. Well, I guess the Washington Post did that because they made their catchphrase, their tagline with that. But, we have to do more than just do the reporting and broadcast it on the social media or whatever. It's more a matter of giving a sense of what we are reading, of what's happening in the world, and helping people in terms of service to make sense of that, to choose the right path, their right path, not our right path, and make choices and that kind of stuff. So I'm not so sure about citizen journalism. It's more about our own role that we have to challenge in that society.
And more journalists coming up from other places than the traditional schools of journalism, etc., I guess.
Of course, that's super important. I mean, I'm if I take my own career, I mean, I started when I was 20 as a photographer in south of France, and poor village, but mostly now I'm teaching at Sciences Po some social media skills classes to journalists, and mostly they are coming from high education background. They are white. They are super trendy. They know everything about anything, but I don't see mixed colors. I don't see people coming from poor backgrounds. I don't see that, and that's very limiting, of course.
The second point you talked about just a little while back about also technologies and stuff like that. I mean, new technologies will be big enablers for journalists. Of course, I read some project about the project where they are creating this AI helper that will help you sift through tens of thousands of pages of documents quickly to find out correlations and combinations and how different things fit together within the context of what information is in those documents. So all of this will, of course, help journalists immensely, but it could also become a bit of a divider, because if you can't use them, if you are for some reason not good at technology, you're all of a sudden in the back seat and no longer, it's more difficult for you to compete with the ones who know more about technology.
Yeah. The problem is that actually, you have to spend a lot of money to actually develop these kind of tools. You need to have different kind of professions in your newsroom to understand these kind of challenges. And that's kind of a problem, because at some point, it creates a divide between those who can afford that kind of stuff and those who can't. I mean, if you think about just the local news, local newspaper won't be able in the near future to have that kind of newsroom where, I mean, we saw like 2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal recruited product owners, developers. I mean, they hired like 10 or 20 people just to, reinforce their newsroom with the tech part. I mean, a local newspaper can't do that. I mean, it's really complicated. First, you don't have the resources, because you need to find the people who are capable of understanding and doing that kind of work, and it's not that much available. They will probably go work where the money is, and not to your local newspaper. And then after that, you need to have the whole infrastructure around it to support that kind of work. And I mean that not in a technical sense, because computers and everything are something that you can buy, but you need a culture in the newsroom that is supporting that kind of effort. And it's really, really hard to find that in any newsroom.
So in a sense, it's moving back, but just with new competences, because I remember back in the days when you were doing television, or you were doing newspaper journalism, or you were doing radio, you were a journalist, and you had a producer with you, you had a sound technician, you had you were a team that was out working. If you were a newspaper journalist, you wrote some stuff, but you had a photographer with you to take the photos. Yeah. And it's been moving more and more in all the places I worked back then. It moved more and more into one person doing everything. I'm interviewing, I'm editing, I'm taking the photos, I'm putting up the web articles, I'm producing the radio interview. I'm doing everything on my own. But now it's becoming almost impossible to know all the stuff that you need to know to be able to be a good investigative journalist. So you need collaboration again.
Yeah, I think that moment where you had like this journalists who were doing 1,000 things at the same moment, this was actually driven by mostly economic pressure than,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone just said, okay, I want to do that and that and that at the same moment. I did think that actually at some point I would do that. And it was super interesting. You learn a great deal of things, techniques.
Of course, yes.
But it's not sustainable. You have 24 hours per day. And if you want to do everything, I mean, you just become crazy. So that's a problem. And now collaboration, because of course you need to have like a data scientist background when it comes to analyzing data coming from a spreadsheet that is leaked by some anonymous sources. And if you want to look at precisely the way pictures or video are analyzed, you need some kind of computer degree to know exactly, to use that kind of tool. And a journalist doesn't have that. It's not their fault. It's just you need to learn that kind of tool. So that kind of skill. So of course, collaboration now is key for this kind of stuff, and that's a good thing also.
Yes, absolutely.
Different point of view also.
Yeah.
Different approach.
Now, we can't talk about journalism in 2019 without talking a little bit about fake news. But we could talk about it from this specific angle that I know that you're looking into, and that's the notion of, or the phenomenon of deep fakes has been rising now for the past couple of years or so. Could you just briefly explain what is deep fake for those who doesn't know?
Yes, a deep fake is mostly, for now, it's a video content that is produced by an artificial intelligence. So that appeared on the Reddit forum 2 years ago, I guess. And the guy who invented that was trying to merge the face of an actress on the body of another actress, and mainly it was a porn actress, right? Yeah. So basically, the guy managed to create an algorithm that is looking for a very large number of sources from one actress, a great number of sources from another actress, and from that, the algorithm created a new picture, which is fake. Totally invented but really convincing. So that's what is a deep fake. It's a video that looks like it's legit, but it's not.
And that can be used. I mean, I've seen examples where they've taken the voice from one person and put it onto an interview. You can make it appear that the person is saying something even in another language that they are absolutely not saying, and takes and that's quite dangerous. I mean, especially today, when any kind of news that is seen as scandalous or more polarizing or whatever can spread around the world in a matter of minutes if it's exciting enough. Yeah,
well, you know what? To me, the deepfake, I call them weapon of mass deception, because the thing is, it has exactly the same kind of role that nuclear weapons have. You don't find them at every corner of the street because it's really hard to create for now. I mean, you need to have a computer to dig a little bit into the software, how it works, and create your own corpus of picture to create the old fake. I mean, it's time processing. You need to have a computer that has a solid graphic card and everything. So, but actually the simple notion of that deepfake being able to exist, to be out there without us having the possibility of noticing it, is already a threat. If you think about it, it's like, I don't know if you know that small story about a little boy calling for the wolf and say, okay, there is a wolf coming. It's exactly the same thing. Everyone is talking about the deepfake. Nobody saw a real threatening deepfake yet. I'm sure it will happen at some point, but just the fact that we are talking about it makes it even more dangerous, because everyone becomes suspicious about it, and that resonates with all the fake news phenomenon that we have since 2016. Where everyone is looking at everything, saying, okay, it's true, it's not true. the doubt is rising so much that it's becoming very, very hard to actually distinguish the truth from something else. So yeah, it's a very troubling phenomenon.
It feels like skepticism might be the journalist's most important tool in 2019, in a sense.
I think you need to question all the documents that you receive, and there is some tools that are not now available to actually detect this kind of deep fake, as you mentioned earlier. In the conversation, there is the MIT is working on that. We have a scientist here in France, nearby Paris, who developed also a technique, very interesting technique to actually detect deep fake. So the detection is like a cat and mouse kind of game where you try to catch the mouse, and she's running in front of you, and so yeah, it's a race, and it's a never-ending race to catch the author of a deepfake. But I think that actually today, a journalist, and it's more, I know it's philosophical for now, but it's not even philosophical, because actually that's what The Guardian is doing. Mm-hmm. You need to reconnect with your audience in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a very deep and meaningful way. Not the thing that, we are going to open the comment section because, we trust that it's very interesting. No, you need to be in the street with the guys. You need to live with them. You need to come from that background that you are covering. You need to talk to them. It's a very different job that most of the journalists are doing for now.
Yeah, it's the notion of the collective journey of you and your audience being on the same journey of discovery together, and they can teach you stuff, whereas you can tell them stuff that they need to know. So it's a working together kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that notion of collective journey is really interesting. It's coming from the transmedia world, I guess. But that's something that is indeed supporting the narrative effort of a journalist. I think we have to think more about that and reconnect. And I think that the vaccine against deepfake is probably there. I mean, it's probably the fact that we will be able to reconnect with our audience in a truthful way that actually will kill the deepfake, because nobody will. Fake news to me is like a virus. I mean, if you're in shape and everything is good, you have a good health and everything. I mean, you can catch a bad cold, but it's just going to be there. It's just going to be a bad cold. But if you are weak and you are diminished and your white cells are, weak also, a bad cold can kill you.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So, and to me, that's the kind of thing that is happening today. We need to have like a strong media industry with journalists that are listening to, the population. And then we'll have no problem, no worries with this kind of.
Where would you say one would start learning? I mean, if you're a journalism student, or even if you're a seasoned pro, I teach journalism students from time to time, and many of them I talk to are quite frustrated also as they get into, for instance, their first editorial meetings at the local newspaper, and everyone assumes that since these people are in their early 20s, they know all there is to know about, social media, online interactions, deep fakes, whatever. And most of them don't and feel quite left out. So where would you say a student or a pro or a, seasoned journalist, where to start?
What I see, I would push them in the street and say, okay, I would use some techniques that are, that you can find in the UX design environment, for example. Try to listen in a very neutral way. Don't interfere with what is said. When you are questioning people, don't try to question them as a journalist, but as an individual, or mark your interest not necessarily to the opinion, but to how these people are forming their ideas. And so your material, your basic material will be different when you go back to the newsroom. And once you're here, you can, play with all the tools that are available. And but I think that's some kind of renewed curiosity that we have to learn again.
Yeah.
It's I know it's counterintuitive because at some point we might hope that actually a technological solution will rise and end our misery, but actually I think it's deep inside us, and we just have to go back to the roots.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree, because technology can only help you so far. If you don't have the right mindset and you don't have the right angle to approach people and engage with them and validate their interaction and take them with you on the journey, then the technology will only help you make the same stuff that's been made already, in a sense.
Yeah, and when I see seasoned professionals who are in the job since 20 years, they are coming from another dimension. I mean, it was a time where you had a full-time employment, the salary was good, nobody was complaining about advertising going to Facebook or Google because it didn't even exist, and so they developed. It's not their fault, but they developed professional habits that are in their veins. And they need to learn actually what is happening today and how to, change this culture that is coming from 20 years ago. It's not that it was good for this period of time, but now it's not adapted. And the young guys are looking to them like they are, references and everything. But I think they are not really references. They are mostly people who don't know exactly what to do with the situation that we have. So we have to invent that together.
So one final question. I'm trying not to run over time here, but one final question for this session. What do you think the future is going to be like then? Are there going to be journalists in the future?
Well, that's also a good question. I think there is a need at some point for journalists and journalism. I don't see the need for maybe 60% of the media that we already have, the brand that we know. When you think about local media, I don't see them existing in that form in 10 years because things are changing really rapidly. Maybe you will find some groups that will be able to survive and find a way to, gain their money in a different way. But at the end, you will have in France, you're going to have Le Monde, Le Figaro. I'm not even sure about Libération. I hope so, but so a couple of newspapers like this. In the US, you can have the Washington Post, the New York Times, and probably another one like the Wall Street Journal. But it's not going to be that much. In the contrary, you're going to have thousands of small entities that will be more or less serious about their journalism, and that's going to be the challenge to how to find what is real, the real information that you need to actually exist, make the good choices, and in terms of environmental crisis, if you think about that, we're going to need some kind of newspaper with a leader on that part of news, and I don't see that for now.
No, I was just going to say it's going to be extremely interesting to see how this all plays out. Are we just going to have a million YouTubers, each with a slightly different angle on the world, and they're going to be the one who are interpreting what's happening to their million viewers? Or are we going to have is everything going to be swallowed up by Google in the end, or, whatever?
You know what? I was watching a video last time, like 3 days ago, about a French writer, Romain Gary. And this guy was saying, actually, he died in the 80s, and the video was made probably in the 60s, end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. And basically, the guy was predicting what is happening right now. The end of monopolistic kind of media, the disintermediation, the tribal, the rise of tribes everywhere, the rise of internet, that kind of stuff. It was in own words, but he was able to predict that. And I think that somewhere you have a guy like this who is already able to foresee this kind of future. And probably what he will see is something that is quite surprising and, something that we can't expect really. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that if we try to predict the future, we will be wrong at some point.
I think I agree fully with you on that one. Gerald, thanks you so much for joining me for this podcast, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
For sure. Thanks for inviting me.